Alright, we're looking at the C block. Now this is going to be a 3-view drawing again, looking at it from the top, front, and right side views. The 3 main measurements we need to see is the length of the piece is 5 inches, the width of the piece is 1.5, and the height of the piece is 2.5. So with that said, we've got the cheat sheet out on the computer screen. It gives us all the centering and stuff that we need. 1.5 is how wide the piece is. The 1 inch is the spacing between the views. The 2.5 is how tall it is. 5 inches wide by 1 inch spacing and 1.5 inch width there. And then we've got the measurements to center out, which I expect you to be able to do already. If we look at the drawing paper, I already have these measurements lined up and worked out. So I'm going to go ahead and shoot my lines down for how wide and everything my part is. Notice that I'm not drawing lines way across my paper. Again, I'm just putting it where I think that they're going to be at by the marks that I have previously put on my paper. Right there is my top, front, and right side views. The first view I'm going to draw is the front view, and from that front view I see 3 rectangles. And it tells me the measurements of these rectangles. It says that it's a 1/2 inch wide here, 2.5 between the middle, and it leaves me a 1/2 inch wide there. So I'm going to place those on my drawing. So on my front view then, I'm going to come down here, measure a 1/2 down. I'm going to measure a 1/2 inch up. And if I measure that, it should be about, it actually doesn't give us that measure, don't need to know it. So a 1/2 inch down, a 1/2 inch up, I'm going to pull it across, and there's my 3 rectangles that we're talking about. If I look at this from the right side view, over here, I'm going to see a C in this part. So the first thing that I can do is transfer over these horizontal lines like we normally do. So I'm transferring that over, and I'm going to transfer this over. I didn't go all the way because on the drawing it says that we're going to come in 1 inch right here to get the C. So I'll measure in 1 inch. Go ahead and connect it up. Go ahead and erase out what you don't see. At this point, there's my C that I would see. Now I'm going to try to do something different here. I'm going to try to transfer points from my top view to my right side view. I've already done all the measurements to be able to get this piece, but when I look down at it, I got to recognize that this rectangle is not solid all the way through, so I need to transfer a feature around. So I'm going to go from this upper right hand corner and draw a 45-degree angle line. I'm going to take this line right here, I'm going to shoot it up. Where it intersects at that point, I can run it across, and this is where we will have a hidden line for this piece. Now once again, this right here is worth 7 points. I'm going to clean up the drawing a little bit so I can dimension it, and I will turn the camera back on. Now once again, on this particular drawing, we need to dimension it to get the last 3 points. And the first 3 measurements that we have to have are the length, the width, and the height of this drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and start pulling off my extension lines, leaving that gap in there, pulling it up. I'm going to leave that gap in there and pull it up. Go ahead and shoot a line across here, leave a space in the middle for my overall dimension. Put my arrowheads in. And this one is 5. And again, I left those gaps there, and I have that overhanging mark there. The overall height of this part, I'm going to put it over here, using my triangles and T-squares here. The overall height of the part is 2.5. Again, I left the gap there, and I got the overhanging mark there. And then finally I got the overall thickness of the part, which I'll pull off the part as well, leaving that gap and things in there. So now I've got the arrowheads. This part happens to be 1.5. Now when I look at this feature, I see 1, 2, 3 rectangles. I have to dimension 2 of those 3. And the 2 that were happen to be on the drawing were the 1/2 inch mark, so I'm going to go ahead and dimension those. Put in a 1/2. Put in my 1/2, so that's 2 of my 3. I don't need to dimension the third one because that would be 3 of the 3 instead of 2 of the 3. Now I'm looking at my right side view and I've really got 2 measurements there as well. I've got the one for this gap, there's 1 and 2. So I need 1 of the 2 dimensioned. In this example, not very often do we typically dimension on a piece, but I think in this example it is the easiest way to show it. You don't want to dimension to a hidden line because it's kind of hard to represent where that dimension is going to. And if we put the dimension right here, it could be remotely confusing because that's not an extension line. So I'm actually going to just put an arrow right here on the middle of my part saying, hey, that is 1 inch. And now that figure, the C block, is now completed.